everyone, my name is Trang, and today I'm gonna talk about episode 9 called Bias is Not Bias from the Japan Deep Cultural Podcast. So at first, when I heard the word bias, I thought like it was something really negative, kind of like discrimination. But after listening to this episode, I realized that bias is actually like something really natural and everyone has it. So in this presentation, I will explain the main idea of the episode, like why it's important and how it related to my life and living in Vancouver. So the speaker in this episode are Joseph Salk and Yvonne Vanderpool. So Joseph is the director of the Japan Intercultural Institute and Yvonne is the intercultural trainer. So basically both of them work in the intercultural communication, which means they help people understand different culture and avoid misunderstanding when interacting with others. The main topic of this episode is cognitive bias. So, cognitive bias means the shortcut that our brain use to think quickly. So, the podcast explained that our brain like is often lazy and it doesn't want to analyze anything deeply. So, it use like past experience to make quick judgment. And this normal because the podcast explained that bias is part of how our brain work and we cannot avoid it. But the problem is not bias itself. So the real problem is when we don't realize we have bias. And the podcast give a very interesting example. So the podcast make a great point of that our brain is like naturally lazy and love to save energy. So bias is its default setting is a high-speed mental shortcut that allow us to make a decision without thinking like too hard. So this was a survival superpower for human thousands of years ago when we had to act fast. However, in our model world, these same energy saving shortcut often lead us to the skip the truth about people who are different from us because it's gonna causing like unfair judgment before we even realize it. So a great example from this episode is from Yvonne bike story. When she fell off her bike, a man with many tattoos come and help her, and her brain like immediately think that the bias that he might be dangerous, but actually like, he's very kind. So they show that our brain make a quick assumption, and these assumptions come from past experience, and sometimes like they are wrong. So the podcast also discuss about the Bhavak cracker like the Buddhist way of life. It used symbol like there are three animals: a pig, a snake, and a rooster. So a pig gonna represent for the ignorance, and in our life, this like being an autopilot, and we don't even realize that we are judging others because of our bias is hidden, and the snake gonna present the anger or dislike. When we don't understand a different culture, like our inner pig, like ignorance, often turn into a snake and make us feel annoyed or defensive. And the rooster represent for the attachment. So we are often too attached to our own way of doing things, like thinking our culture is the only right way. So the podcast explained that these three animals by each other tells in a circle, and it means our ignorance create a bias, and our bias create more misunderstanding. But learning about intercultural communication, we are not trying to destroy the will because bias is a natural. Instead, we're trying to wake up and become aware of these animal. And when you realize that, oh, I am being a pig right now, I'm being ignorant. That's the exact moment you start become like interculturally competent. So, this episode is also talk about some type common like some common type of bias. That's the ethnocentrism, mean that judging other based on our own culture. So it's like wearing a cultural glasses, and we use our cultural as a standard to judge everyone else. And if they think it's differently, we automatically think that we are wrong instead of just differently. And the second one is fundamental attribute error, means that thinking someone behavior is their personality, not the situation. So we tend to blame a person character for their action, but we blame the situation for our own. For example, like if I am late, it's because of the heavy traffic, like it's the situation. But if a classmate is late, I'm gonna think that because they are lazy or they are disorganized. It's about their personality. So in intercultural setting, it lead to a really unfair label. And that's the last one gonna be in group and out group mean that thinking my group is diverse, but other group are all the same. So our brain divide the word into like us and them. We give people in our in group like our family or fellow Vietnamese the benefit of the doubt. But for the out group, like we often use like stereotype because it's faster way for our brain to process them. So, this topic is very important, especially in the intercultural communication. When we are in a new country or a new environment, everything gonna unfamiliar and we will face like cultural threat. So because we are outside our comfort zone, so our brain get tired, and to save the energy, we're gonna it gonna realize more on bias. And one common mistake is the fundamental attribute error. This when we judge someone behavior as their personality, and like thinking a person is rude rather than seeing the situation. Maybe like they are just dread or follow a different cultural norm. And in a globalized world, if we don't understand this, we're gonna stay trapped in ethnocentrism and judging other based on our cultural standard. For example, like someone is quiet and we think that they are shy, and someone like don't smile and we're gonna think that they are rude. But actually, like it could just be cultural difference. So if we don't understand bias, we can easily judge other incorrectly. And personally, I found this episode very relatable. As an international student living in Canada, I interact with people from many different culture like every day, and sometimes I realize that I also make some quick judgment without thinking. Like for example, at my workplace, I sometimes assume that customers who are very direct or being impolite. But after listening to this podcast, I realized that this is my just my Vietnamese cultural perspective, but actually they may just have a different communication style, and I understand that this is my own bias, not their problem. So the idea connect to the Deardorff process model of intercultural competence. 2006, like Deardorff said that the foundation of competence is attitude, like especially openness. So when recognizing my bias, I'm practicing self-awareness, and it leads to an internal outcome in how I see and understand others. Instead of judging, I start to feel empathy. So the model said that the communicate effectively across culture, and we need to be openness, self-awareness, and reflection, and recognizing our own bias is the first step. So if I had to explain this to a friend, I would say that our brain is like a smartphone with an autocorrect, and it's fast and helpful, but sometimes like it make mistake that you can turn it off, but you can learn to proofread your thoughts. Like these shortcuts help us like survive, but they can just also lead to wrong assumption. So having bias is normal, but we need to be aware of it. And this quotation explained that our brain doesn't just sit there and wait for the information. It's a predictive machine that try to guess that what will happen next based on like it's already what we already know. And in a new cultural environment, this machine often make a wrong guess because it's using old data to judge new people. So recognizing this help us stay humble and realize that our first impression is just a prediction, not necessarily the truth. And for the connection that we see that diversity every day and on the schedule, like at school or at work, but our brain like often use a shortcut called like in-group or out-group bias. So thinking of like this, like our friends, like we see everyone as a unique individual, but when stranger or other group, our brain get lazy and think, oh, they're all the same. To build like a truly inclusion community in these years, we must wake up and stop using these mental shortcut, and we need to see people as a real individual, like not just a label. And if we don't understanding bias, we may judge other unfairly. But if we are aware of our bias, we can be more open-minded and communicate better. So, in conclusion, the episode showed that bias is not always a bad thing. It's a natural part of being human. However, if we are not aware of our bias, it can lead to misunderstanding and miscommunication. So being aware of our bias is the first step toward be better in intercultural communication. By stepping out of our comfort zone and reflecting on our mental filter, we can become a better neighbor and classmate here in Canada. And here's my reference, and thank you for watching.